years, and also the very important practice of documenting these events. We laugh at it, but it's also very horrible to watch, right? And it really makes the absurdity so apparent when we can see it like this. So let's invite our three speakers to the stage. First, Director Martyn See. He's a filmmaker known for his documentaries of political figures and historical events. His past works explore the experiences of opposition leaders and former political detainees. So as you can imagine, his films have garnered a lot of attention and discussion in Singapore. The moderator for this session, Jolovan Wham, was formerly the executive director of the humanitarian organization for migration economics, HOME, and he's an activist for democracy, migrant workers' rights, and abolition and transformative justice. Chee, who we see in the film, is the Secretary General of the Singapore Democratic Party, and is an activist for democracy, civil liberties, and human rights. In 1998 and 1999, Dr. Chee also held public rallies about free speech laws without a permit, which was followed by the establishment of Speaker's Corner in 2000. I'll hand over to Jolovan.
Hello everyone, such a nice warm welcome to all of you for coming to watch this film and staying for the discussion. I think I will start off this panel by asking Martyn, the filmmaker, some questions. Martyn, when I saw this film 20 years ago, I remember feeling very riveted because of how powerful it was. Could you tell us why did you want to do this film? What was the genesis of it?
Two reasons. First of all, I made two films before this. The first one was called Singapore Rebel, which basically chronicled the political career of Dr. Chee. So that one was banned. Not only was banned, I was sent to the police station. I was under investigation for 18 months for violating the Political Films Act. But that case was dropped. Then my second film, I interviewed Saad Zahari, former detainee. And that film was also banned, but that was not a police case. So I made this third film because I was on the roll, right? So I wanted this film to be banned as well. But they did ban it, so surprisingly, so they allowed it. NC-16 said, okay. That's one reason. Second reason is it's important to document things like that because the last march Singapore ever had was in 1988 when NTUC chief back then, Ong Teck Chong, led a march against the American government for so-called interfering in our affairs. So that was 1988. So I think this attempt in 2006 was historical, so it's good to document. And I'm quite disappointed that the last recession, the one that Tokila did with the watermelon umbrella, Gaza march, the water march, right, the procession to Istana was not documented. So as a filmmaker, you need to document historical events, and this is important for me. Yeah, this is my two reasons for it.
You had some run-in with the authorities also, right, in the making of the two films that you mentioned earlier. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that? Like, why did they find it problematic?
Okay,
what did they do to you?
Yeah, so not a lot of people know that, but there's under the Film Act Section 33, it forbids anyone from making political films. Yeah, so when I made Singapore Rebel on Dr. Chee, I submitted to the Singapore International Film Festival. Singapore International Film Festival called me and said, you better withdraw this one because the police will come after you. So I withdrew it, but the next day the police called me anyway. So I was under investigation for about 16 months, from 2005 to about 2006. So under investigation, I made the Saad Zahari one. And I think when I made this, the investigation was dropped already. Yeah.
So what did they do during the investigation?
They confiscated my camera, and then I told them I did my editing on a laptop, on a friend's laptop, so they have no computer to confiscate. They asked me a lot of political questions. At one point, I stood up and said, this is ridiculous. They asked me what's my political affiliation, am I a member of any political party, what are my political views, things like that. So I went to the police station about 4 times over the course of a year and a half. So it's quite, IO was quite cordial because I made everything public, you see. Every time I called the police station, I informed the press, I wrote it in my blog. I made everything public because my main aim was not to create a chill effect among other filmmakers. So I continued to make my second and third in order to calm the situation so the other filmmakers feel free to also make more of such things. Yeah.
Okay. So what was the outcome of these investigations?
Singapore Rebel, they dropped it, it's warning in lieu of the law. Right? You got a few of that too, right? It means nothing. So, you should need a warning.
Okay, so you got a warning. Right. Okay, so going back to the film, so the events unfolded in a period of about 3 days, right? So maybe could you share with us a little bit about what you were thinking and feeling throughout that process?
Okay, good question. I mean, the first few hours was quite stressful. If you watch the first 4 or 5 chapters. Then as the days progressed, as the hours progressed, it gets more and more comical. So my idea of how I structured it was to make it entertaining. So all the entertaining bits I basically threw it in. My only regret was I didn't show up day 2. I remember day 2 it rained. So we were in a great shot. I think, where were you guys sleeping? In the tent, is it? Yeah. So we were in a great shot, but 2 days ago, my husband, it rained. So that's my only regret. Yeah. And nothing much happened on day 3 and day 4. So you can see day 3 and day 4 only 1 chapter. Yeah.
So was there any investigation for doing this film?
For this film, no investigation. Okay. I submitted it. I submitted myself to the board of film censorship, and it was clear.
It was clear. What was the rating?
Yeah. NC16 until today's
NC16. But then it was NC16 too, right?
Okay.
All right. Dr. Chee. So. Speaker's Corner, I mean, one of the things which I think a lot of Singaporeans perhaps don't really know is how Speaker's Corner came about, right? The history of Speaker's Corner. And you played quite an important role in its formation. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, first of all, thank you to the organizers for inviting me and just having this opportunity to talk a little bit and reminisce a little about the good old times. Prior to this event, this World Bank IMF meeting and this protest that we staged, Speaker's Corner was then out and about really, and I think Martyn very cheekily titled this whole thing called Speaker's Corner. Because at that time, Speaker's Corner or Hong Kong Park was still a venue where you had to register. You saw the clip, but then you could not do anything like what we're able to do today, and that is even to shout out slogans, chants. You could not gesticulate. You could only speak without any voice enhancement equipment. And I thought that was a human rights joke at the time, right? So having that Speaker's Corner, and that had its antecedents as well. Just about 1999, I think it was just around then, towards the end of it. There was no Hong Kong Park, there was no Speaker's Corner. So what I did was then, at that time, picked up a little, at that time, you just had those small microphone speakers, portable speakers, and just a clip-on mic. And I made my way down to Raffles Place, and I just issued a press statement and said that I was going to go there and give a lunchtime talk. Anyway, the police all came out and said that if I did that, they would come down and arrest me and prosecute me. But I went down anyway, and I was really a nervous wreck at the time. Not so much because the police was going to be around. I was just really afraid that nobody would show up. Right? And really be in a pickle. But in any case, a sizable crowd was there, and I just talked about HDB prices, and sounds very familiar nowadays. And then I told the crowd right there, I'll be back at the same time, same place, next week, the following week. And I did that again. And a bigger crowd showed up right now. So it was that generated a bit of conversation. And I remember there was a flurry of articles in Straits Times forum. And people were questioning, say, yeah, why can't we have a free speech venue? But of course, not before really, knocking me down and saying I was a troublemaker and so on and so forth. But what happened was that following that there was the World Economic Forum, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and then the late William Sapphire, columnist at the New York Times, he had buttonholed Lee Kuan Yew and asked him, well, why can't you guys have this, have a little more liberalism in Singapore, I beg your pardon, just more liberal state in Singapore, and to my shock, Lee Kuan Yew says, maybe, why not, and that kind of thing. So he came back and decided to say, well, let's have this place called Speaker's Corner, and that was it then. What happened was that they didn't allow all these things that I was telling you about, protest and so on, and that's when we staged this WBIMF. And following that, Goh Chok Tong was then taken over as Prime Minister, said they would liberalize the rules to allow some of the activities that were able to do that today. So moral of the story is that you've got to constantly be there to push boundaries to make sure that we progress as a society and win back the rights that have been taken away from us for so many decades.
And after this protest, so after this protest, a few years later, Pink Dot happened until today. So from 1999 to about 2004 or 5, people are not allowed to chant slogans. We can only speak with time without amplification sound system. So in 2004, when PM Lee rolled over, he liberalized Speaker's Corner to allow for protests, demonstrations, and speaker systems. So that much, that event that Dr. Chee held was an attempt to further liberalize Speaker's Corner to be able to march to Parliament House. And then a few years later, there was a lot more protest events happened there, chief of which is Pink Dot, and then Gilbert Goh had say no to a 6.9 million population event there as well. Quite a few events happened during that period of time. My question to all of you is, when watching this, how did you feel? This film is 18 years old. Do you think this thing will happen today? Are we becoming more restrictive than before? Yeah.
Yes, that's a good question, and we'll be able to maybe get some of your comments and your reflections later during the audience Q&A. But for now, I would like to ask, both of you can also answer this question. Reflecting on this documentary over it's been more than almost 20 years, right? Yeah, how have you seen the space for public dissent in Singapore evolve? Yeah. So do you think there's been any progress, or has there been setbacks? What are your thoughts?
Okay, let's first look at the laws. So after this protest, they passed the Public Order Act, and to restrict further the ability to protest. Remember one chapter, Dr. Chee said, there's only 4 of us, not 5, right? So back then, in 20s or so, you can actually, in a group of less than 5, something like that, you can actually walk in assembly. But then Public Order Act came in and said that no procession, or every procession needs a police permit, and they don't give. And Jolovan and Dr. Chee applied for such permits before, and the police said that they won't issue such licenses. And then the Public Order Act was amended by Shanmugam even more to restrict protests, to even say that even one-man protest is illegal. Yeah, that's the situation that this one precipitated. But on the film side, what I did with my 3 films was to liberalize the Films Act. Now they kind of allow political films as long as it's not like a political advertisement during elections. Yeah, although the law doesn't say it, but they now they allow political films like the Workers' Party, SDP already. So that part is liberalized.
Yeah, I always see this as a work in progress. It never ends. You'll fight for your liberty. You'll fight to retain what's meaningful in your citizenship. That work is never done, right? And right after, I remember having attended some multiple court cases regarding these protests. I remember telling some people, I think Martyn was there, if I'm not mistaken, Alex Au was just around there, I'm not sure Alex is if you're here today. But in any case, we had a discussion, and I just told them at some point, what we'll need to do is to, our strategy included one, just to make sure that we won over people who were willing to listen and to believe. And one of them was right here, Jolovan, correct? Because very soon after, you remember, Jolovan carried out his own protests, albeit also attracting a lot of, bringing a lot of trouble to his own convenience, if you will. But that's the whole idea, you see. Then Jolovan now transmits it to the next generation of people who are willing to stand up. And I'm talking about those, that group there that walked all the way to the Istana to deliver that protest over the Gaza war. And this is what I mean for us, And before me, there were people, J.B. Jaran, the late J.B. Jaran, very courageously stood up against the regime at that time. And all this happened, mind you, before the age of social media, before the age of your phones. So we had no way of documenting what we did. Martyn was a handheld camera at that time. I think the only thing was available to us at that time was YouTube, and that was just about it. But then times change, technology changes. And that's where I think you play a very important role in safeguarding what's rightful to us. What is meaningful to us to be called a citizen of Singapore? What, just to hold a passport so we can go overseas and have a good time and then come back, exercise that vote once every 4 years? No. Your citizenship is what gives you that right. And it's written into the Constitution, our Constitution. The right to assemble, the right to speak, the right to associate. And it's not a privilege. It's not something which the government confers upon us. It is what belongs to us. And when the government restricts us, it has taken over that right that belongs to us. And so in the exercise, when we stand up and sing Majulah Singapura, just also remember, it was the exercise of citizens at that time that won the right for us to be independent today, so that today we don't sing God Save the King. We sing Majulah Singapura. So that's what it means to us. So let's continue to, even though we may take one step back, we take 2 steps forward. And as I said, I think we are making progress slowly, no doubt, but very surely we are making progress. And I just want to encourage everybody to continue, not to give up that fight.
So how do you balance this cost that you pay, right, for your activism and for your political work, and how do you balance the personal cost of this with your desire to push for these freedoms?
I guess if you don't calculate it in terms of cost and benefit, because it doesn't make sense, especially in terms of monetary value, right? Think of it in this way, that what's going to cost you will also cost the PAP. Correct? And I give you one very good example. Before this whole thing, I said Speaker's Corner was then liberalized. They gave more room for it. And I remember my jaw just dropped when I read one day this report saying that Goh Chok Tong, at that time he was Prime Minister, said, we have to liberalize. Why? Because if we keep doing this, we will lose you. Meaning he was talking to young folks at that time. And to this day, I can tell you, young Singaporeans are still leaving Singapore because they just cannot tolerate the kind of very straight-jacketed kind of society. And the government knows that. So as much as you have to pay the penalty that costs, sometimes it costs you your inconvenience of having to go to court and so on, you pay a fine, frankly speaking, right? For me, I went to prison because I wasn't willing to cooperate with them. And I said, I'd rather go to prison than pay this fine. And so I did. But every time you do something like this, you grab the microphone, and it's yours. And for that episode, you can tell Singaporeans, educate them, and tell them what it truly means to be a citizen of this country. And the government, as much as Shanmugam right now is telling you all sorts of nonsense about this, and they are listening. And they are very careful in what they continue to do to you. Okay, so, but if you leave one person going out there and standing by itself, yeah, well, they're going to overcome you very easily. But when you stand up as a group, and you tell them you won't accept this oppression and this kind of very repressive kind of state, they will sit up and they will listen and they will concede, because at some point Singapore has to move forward. We are one of the very few countries left in this part of the world that continues to run this kind of society where even one person, one lone person, cannot stand up there and says, I don't like what the government is doing. It's madness in this day and age. So just be mindful of that, that even as we are facing with the government, we continue to be respectful of society, to be respectful of authority, but not be fearful of it. That's the difference between a mature, sophisticated society that thinks for itself, that is able to pull Singapore forward and not continue to languish in what we've been doing 1950s, 60s, 70s, that kind of situation. The world has changed. We must adapt to that change. If not, we will get left behind or will become irrelevant.
So how would you respond to, like I was, just the other day, my mom was telling me, no use one, you cannot win. Yeah, so how do you respond to critics who say you're just banging your head against the wall?
That story is that, right, prior to 20, when was, Speaker says 20, what year was that? I've forgotten already, but I know it was in September that they formed, September, but the year I've forgotten. But just take 6 months, a year, prior to when our Speaker's Corner was established, right? And I tell you that one day we will have this free speech venue. You know, people will laugh you out of the room. But it did happen. It is right before you. You see it for your own eyes. That things can change. And I can tell you times have changed, right? Again, years before, if you said that Lee Hsien Loong and his brother and sisters would have this, oh my goodness, seismic kind of fight, you know, nobody would have believed this, right? But things change. And things do change for the better if only we will put ourselves out into and says, I want to be complex too, I want to be part of it, I want to be that change maker, I want to make history, and things will change and change for the better.
Okay. I'm going to ask Martyn this last question before we go for audience Q&A, because I've been told we need to get out of the cinema by 7:20. Yeah, so Martyn, what would you say to aspiring filmmakers who want to get involved in political work?
So one of the running themes of this film festival, which I've been attending in KL since 2005, is dare to document. So just turn on your camera and document stuff. You can shoot it first and edit it later, or if you're afraid to put it out, just shoot it first. So my only advice is just keep shooting. Not everything's on digital, right? Back then when I was shooting this all tape. So technology is so easy now, you can just upload on YouTube as well. So just keep shooting.
Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to the audience Q&A. Do you have any questions? Or if you don't have questions, you can also give your comments, your perspectives on the issue. Somebody behind there.
Quick question for Martyn. They kept telling you go to the media center, which is kind of hilarious, right? So my question to you is, did you actually go to the media center, and what was in that media center?
The media center is actually the police post that's on its biggest corner. And there wasn't really a media center. I think the police themselves were misinformed by their superiors. Yeah. But I'm just wondering, the number of press people there, what did they do with the footages? Only I put up the film. Wonder what all the cameramen were there for.
Okay. Anyone else? My hand.
I must pay tribute to Dr. Chee and the team of SDP people who put up a whole stage 1 year. I can't remember when, but it's before 2012. And I was amazed that, wow, they could do so much there. And that actually encouraged Function 8 to do the 2012 25th anniversary of Operation Spectrum. Yeah, it happened in 1987. And Freedom Film Fest Singapore is, in a way, organized by Function 8. And we owe it to FFN now, Freedom Film Network of Malaysia. And Martyn was one of those who first got it started with some other friends, and they handed it over to Function 8. So Function 8 in 2012 daringly put up a whole stage, backdrop, speakers, chairs, and an exhibition of what is behind internal security detention. We had rooms, we had exhibits, and so on. And of course, now we have so many books out there for you to look at. They're available in the library too. So thanks, Dr. Chee. Truly, one step at a time, we move forward for a better Singapore.
Thank you, Juan. Yeah, we're 10 minutes. Someone there wants to say.
Hi, I have a question for Martyn. As in, today when you look at documentaries, you don't really hear the person that is behind the camera very often. But one thing I noticed in this film is like, your voice is very obvious.
My voice is, the one that's always shouting, that's not my voice, it's somebody called Uncle. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was you. Sorry.
My voice is only when I interview the police officer. Yeah, those are my voices. But the one that's shouting and quite fierce one is someone called Uncle. Yeah. It's quite funny, guys. It's quite funny. Yeah.
You might be asking, like, how do you, film a political documentary without too much of your voice? How do you make sure you're capturing what you see? And, how do you balance that? Yeah. Thank you.
For this one, it's easy because things unfold as they happen. But I also needed to engage with the police officer, so I have no choice but to put in my own voice because I need to interview them, find out from their side of the story. But it's a good question. I think you need to balance your political documentary so as not to make it seem like you're pushing an agenda. But the bottom line for me is you have to make it entertaining. Yeah, it has to be entertaining. Yeah, you cannot just be pushing an agenda through a film. People can see through that. I think people can spot propaganda quite easily. Yeah. If you watch Singapore Rebel, all my films are online, even the bad ones. Singapore Rebel is just interviewing Dr. Chee, so yeah, it's basically from his perspective. Also not pushing SDP. I never mentioned SDP at all in the film. Yeah.
I learned how to question and harass police officers from you, actually. Okay, who else? Over there.
Hi, so my name is Hanisa. First wanted to say thank you to the speakers for today. I have a short, I would say, thing I want to share, but also a question at the end. And I guess I was intrigued that you mentioned about young Singaporeans living in the country because it's not a very happy thing, but I personally would identify as one of those. I no longer live here. My parents are here, of course, but I've decided that there's a lot of things I disagree about our homeland that I cannot sit here and see my future here. But at the same time, I would say that with today, and we have social media, and we have so many ways of connecting, I would say that that gives a different dimension to working towards a better Singapore, because I'm still with local civil groups, NGOs, and I'm working remotely on climate action, working remotely on many other different things. And I think even with the whole current genocide, you see a lot of our Singaporean diaspora coming together and really rallying together and saying, we have to make change here, and we're going to do it no matter where we're from. And I think that's very beautiful, and that's a lot to build up on. And I guess on that last point, I wanted to ask, because you guys came from a time of, where social media wasn't prevalent. And today the POFMAs are basically on social media, right? Because I guess it shows you that there's some sort of impact it's making. But I think we still question what impact the virtual world makes. And I wanted to ask what you guys thought. How do we know the impact we're doing virtually on social media, or maybe the only restrictive ways we can make a stand, how do we know that actually has made impact on the ground? And if not, what should we look out for? Yeah, when we make that change.
Big question. Chee, has your SDP videos made any impact on the ground?
It maybe imperceptibly from one year to another. But if you look at it through a span of time, that's difference is day and night. I'll tell you this because I've seen that change in that. That years ago, whenever you talked about government, you talk about, Lee Kuan Yew, everybody drops 1 decibel lower, right? Sure, you can't say this and that kind of thing. But nowadays, that has morphed to the point that I think we can openly call out the ministers who, don't quite make sense to us. And I think that even on the ground, I've seen some YouTube, some interviews where people just get on the street, they will tell you things like, openly tell you, hey, that's not quite right. And I just saw one, if I'm not mistaken, just recently, just a couple of days ago, and this Gan Kim Yong was out there and walk about, and says, how are you? And it's just not so good. And, your vouchers, and it's just not enough. So it is, and I know that it's very cliche saying that sometimes the government is our servant, and like fire is a good servant but a terrible, terrible master, right? So we can have that embedded in our minds and tell them that the people are the boss. You tell that often enough and you act upon it, the government will get the message, and that's where we want, where the ruling party, the government, serves the people and not vice versa. So there is a change, and if only because we have all been emboldened by technology, even just for that, I think that's a big plus already. Let's continue to use this technology and continue to be bold and to make sense, to reason, to be logical, and just to stick on facts and figures. And I can tell you, POPMA will become something of Asian history. And it'll go right on our side, so don't worry about making sure that you have that, that your views made known on the social media.
Then the devastating effects of laws like POPMA is not so much how it targets one or two person, it's how much chilling effect it creates among the community. So I always tell people, don't self-censor yourself. Especially if you're an artist, it's very demeaning to self-censor yourself. Just put your work out there, or start writing, start documenting first. Yeah, then we can all come together and help you out if there's, the bringing police trouble or whatever. But Singapore shouldn't self-censor themselves because one or two fellas got into POFMA trouble. Yeah.
It's very quickly, let me come from there. Just one point that I want to make. In social activism, in political activism, any kind of activist work, the worst thing is to feel that you're very isolated and you're the lone single voice out there. So whenever you see somebody getting POPMA or getting into trouble because they've exercised their constitutional right, human right, political right in Singapore. Make sure you rally around that person. It's not hard, right? Send them a message, tell them, I see what you did. I'm here to lend you my support. And if we need to be, let's meet up. But if not, we're always getting together as a group. And that is what PAP is terribly, terribly afraid of.
Yes, the reaction, I think the people's reaction to when somebody's being targeted is important. It's like when Kokila was also poffered recently, a bunch of us, 30 of us decided to come together and repost the post that she was poffered. Yeah, so this kind of resistance is...
That was brilliant.
Yeah. Okay, one more question. I have time for... oh my goodness. I don't know which one to choose. I don't know whose hand went up first. Okay, well... okay.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Charlotte, and first of all, I just want to preface this by saying that I've been to 3 Pink Dots already, and I absolutely appreciate Speaker's Corner as a space for freedom of expression and the work that you've done to make it happen. That being said, though, I am concerned, will increased freedom of expression in Singapore ultimately lead to, for example, our own homegrown, MAGA movement, MAGA, Make America Great Again, people who, discriminate against others and use the chance to be hurtful and discriminatory, that kind of stuff.
Look, this is where that whole idea has come from, right? From leaders. I've tried to make this point. Recently, there was on social media certain sources that made some videos that were very disparaging of me and the SDP. And then I think one of our traditional media asked us, are you going to take action? Is this defamatory and so on? My response to them was, of course not. Meaning, but do I agree with that person putting out that kind of malicious kind of information? No, I don't. But the whole process then is to demonstrate the kind of leadership you'd like to see in Singapore, right? To tell them, in your exercise of your freedom of speech, let's stay away from being malicious and being sensationalistic. And all this is education. And I believe it will take time. It will take time. We will have to find our own level. But I think in Singapore it started from such a low base, and it will have to build up, right? But at some point, it will find its own level, rather than at this stage to keep self-censoring, say, because we're so afraid that we don't want to get there. And I keep making the same point, right? Boats are safer in the harbor, but that's not what boats are made for. And this is why I keep telling Singapore people, go out. You're human beings. You live only once. And that's not an exaggeration, right? What do you want to do? In your short, even if I give you live up to 90. You only get to live once. What are you going to do? Cower in fear? And this is what I keep telling people, express it to the fullest extent that you can without injuring the person beside you. But continue to educate, continue to tell your fellow citizens that life is worth living for. If it's worth living for, it's worth fighting for. But let's do it with respect to our fellow citizens as well. That's the best I can advise I can give.
I'm afraid we don't have enough time left. We need to leave the cinema for the next event that's happening. So, but thank you very much. Please, I thank Dr. Chee and Martyn for and we can continue the conversation outside. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much to Martyn, Jolovan, and Dr. Chee. Really appreciate you. And thank you for ending on such a humane note, Dr. Chee.